going ahead and we're going to hear from Deputy Richard Boyd-Barrett, please.
Well, Taoiseach, people before profit weren't late to comers to calling for mandatory quarantine or a zero-COVID strategy. We've been calling for it for months, and we saw yesterday we paid a very bitter price with 101 fatalities, a record number, for your failure to embrace a coherent zero-COVID strategy and to impose mandatory quarantine. But I want to address another failure, and it's ironic that you refer to workers in your justification for not imposing quarantine and zero COVID, because today is the 300th day of the dispute of the Debenhams Workers, a group that you have very, very badly let down, who were treated despicably by a company they'd worked for 20 or 30 years, who have fought a heroic battle to force Debenhams and indeed to force the government to ensure that the 2+2 collective agreement that they had to get proper redundancy for all those years' work would be honoured. And you have abandoned them. You have insulted them with a €3 million retraining fund, which is just ridiculous. And we now have 490 Arcadia workers in Topshop and many other stores who are now facing a similar situation, similar agreement with Arcadia for 2+2 redundancy arrangements, and they are facing the prospect of only getting statutory redundancy and their employers doing the same despicable action that was done to Debenhams Workers. Now I want to know, even at this late stage, are you actually going to show the solidarity for workers you implied there in your last contribution by, as a minimum, giving the €3 million retraining as a direct cash down payment on the 2+2 that those workers are entitled to? And will you answer the question which the workers are asking, that Mandate have written, I think, twice to you this month, and you haven't even bothered to reply, about the precedent of IBRC? Because you've said, oh, we couldn't possibly bump the workers up the priority list of creditors in liquidation. But what we've happened upon is what happened in IBRC, where there was a similar claim by Michael Noonan at the time, and then it was discovered that 5.5 million was put aside in IBRC, Anglo-Irish Bank, bailed out by the people, where they were given an enhanced redundancy arrangement. And guess who the liquidator was? Kieran Wallace, KPMG, who've also been claiming you can't do this. Even your own, one of your own spokespeople, Willie O'Dea, has been talking about a statutory fund to assist workers like this who are shafted by employers and don't get their proper redundancy. So even at this late stage, on the 300th day of this dispute, will you do right by the Debenhams workers and indeed the Arcadia workers?
I think, Deputy, first of all, I dispute your assertion that we haven't engaged in this issue. We have as a government. I was very clear and straight and honest in terms of our presentation to the workers from the get-go. I think politically others, created sort of expectations that were never going to be realised within the legal framework available to government. Government's not responsible for the actions of the company. We think the company have treated the workers very badly. Government is the only party to this entire dispute that has actually fulfilled its obligations. €13 million has been provided in direct exchequer support, obviously, to guarantee the employment rights in terms of statutory redundancy. That gets dismissed by you. It doesn't even get mentioned. The state is the only player here who has actually stood up to its responsibilities and then sought to see if it could do more within the legal framework that's available to the state. And we did initiate and facilitate talks which were chaired by the Chair of the Labour Court, Kevin Foley. They concluded in December. He issued a report reflecting the outcome of that process. And out of that process then, the government said, OK, we will accept the recommendation to provide €3 million to support career guidance, training, education, business startups for former Debenhams workers. Now, what you're essentially saying, Deputy, is that for every other liquidation that happens now, we should just increase the statutory redundancy. as the way out of this. That would facilitate rogue employers up and down the country, left, right and centre, to exploit taxpayer forever in terms of liquidation processes and in terms of they not fulfilling their legal obligations to workers. Kevin Foley in his report refers to the 2016 collective agreement in his report. He states that, quote, "It is clear that the agreement has no legal application in 2020, unquote. We can't simply, legally, the government can't just top up redundancy payments from the Social Insurance Fund. You know that too. And you know the legal constraints on government, very real ones. But you've chosen to ignore those and just label government as, oh, government couldn't care or government has no interest, which are false assertions. But they're designed and articulated by you for political ends. That's how you engage in this situation. And in terms of other enterprises, we do believe that companies have obligations. They should fulfil their collective agreements with their employees, absolutely. And from our perspective, the state is open to reviewing legislation in terms of giving further protections to workers and also in terms of strengthening in any way we can the situation for workers more generally in the workforce.
Boyd-Barrett.
Minister, first of all, my only interest is to see 1,000 Debenhams workers who have gone through an extraordinary struggle and who've been treated despicably to get the justice that they deserve and the fair redundancy they deserve. And similarly now for the Arcadia workers, another group of workers faced with the same situation because of the failure of your government and successive governments to address this abuse. And I put to you a concrete example. IBRC, bailed out by the people, put a 5.5 million fund of enhanced redundancy out of the assets of IBRC. So those workers, everybody who earned less than €120,000 got enhanced redundancy, despite claims at the time by the government, similar to your own claims, that it couldn't be done. It was Michael Noonan who said it couldn't be done, and it was done, and it was done by the same liquidator who's telling Debenhams workers they can't do it. Answer that. And why can't you, in the particular context of COVID, but also more generally, have a levy on employers, COVID levy, solidarity levy, to actually give enhanced redundancy? And by the way, the Debenhams workers paid for their redundancy.
Time is up, Deputy.
€1 million a year for 20 or 30 years. They paid for it. They are owed that redundancy by the state.
Now, please, Taoiseach.
First of all, two situations are not comparable at all. No ex gratia payments were made by the government in relation to the liquidation of IBRC. None were made by the state at all. And you know that the Debenham liquidation is a court-supervised liquidation. You know that. And one which government could not interfere with. And it's the Oireachtas that liquidated the IBRC in an all-night sitting. The Oireachtas did not liquidate Debenhams. There's fundamental differences there, Deputy. And again, you know that. But you're being populist in your presentation of the issues, because that's what you were doing, and that's what you've been doing since the commencement with others of this dispute, because it's seen as, I don't doubt your sincerity in terms of looking after the workers, but it's also you create platforms to increase support for your movement. That's what a lot of the approaches that you adopt. So you seek to apportion blame to those. The state is not a guilty party to this. The state has upheld its obligations in relation to the workers. And believe me, we've tried everything we could within the law to support the workers. Tried everything we could in terms of facilitating arbitration and so on. And that is
Thank you very much, Taoiseach. We go to the regional group and we'll hear